Okay, we're gonna get going. We'll call the meeting to order. Today is February 3rd, 2025. It is 6:30 p.m. and this is a regular meeting of the Montgomery Select-Board and Water Commission. First item on the agenda, as always, is to review and make any changes to the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I have none.
All right, hearing none, we will jump to the approval of the minutes of the January 23rd special meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
That was the Thursday.
They can't hear
Apparently I'm
on
not getting
Zoom.
any volume for some reason,
They can't hear on
any
Zoom.
audio.
Give us 1 sec and we'll see what we can do. Is the mic switched over to the right mic?
I thought it was. We'll check that.
You might want to turn the volume up on the computer too. It sounds like it's down a little.
I don't think it's coming through my computer. Which doesn't make any sense.
Oh, I think we need to. Oh, I said, oh geez. Where is the volume button on this thing?
Typically, the audio inputs are down
Oh, found it.
in that pop-up.
I turned the volume all the way up.
WCAX is
Did
on
that do
Zoom.
anything?
Yeah, well, our volume, but to get the mics to go.
The mics should be UHD capture, so it should be picking up your mics.
It's under same as system digital, so do you want to go to that, or is it digital audio?
Oh, let's go to this one.
Go this one, see if
Yeah.
that works.
All right, let's try that now.
Is this better for folks on Zoom? Larry, is this any better?
Thank you.
Is that a yes? I will take that as a yes.
Yeah. Let's be.
Hearing no objection, we'll go with yes. All right. Let's go to the yes. So this is the approval of the minutes of January 23rd. This was the special meeting held on a Thursday evening because the Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Anybody else here, Charlie? No.
So Larry, you can't hear us still? Could it be because you're presenting?
I'm not actually presenting yet.
I
So,
don't think it would do
But
that.
Mike says
Well, it looks like
he's on
Charlie
Zoom,
is
it's
muted.
WCAX that he sees.
Yeah, whatever.
It says WCX Zoom. I'm just trying to help.
I mean, the issue is generally that the microphones are not hooked into the right. Well, let's try that one.
So everything's set on my end.
Can you talk into the mics and see if Larry can hear you?
Larry, can you hear us now?
Or anybody?
I can hear you, Charlie. Yeah.
Which one do you decide to?
Yeah, but are they hearing me because of that?
Can you?
I hear you now.
Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
I do. A sweet voice, yes, I hear it.
Okay. I'm not sure why that setting is the one that we need because it's not the usual one, but nothing ever works the same way twice. All right, so folks joining remotely, you can hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so with that, circling back to the approval of the January 23rd minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a second from Suzanne. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the January 23rd meeting as written, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, and you've approved the minutes of the January 23rd special meeting. If we need them, there are more chairs back over here, just so that we can hand them out when folks come in. Next up, we have the Franklin Natural Resource Conservation District Flood Resilience and Hazard Mitigation Study presentation. So at this point, I will turn it over to our guests. I'm going to allow you to screen share. And then board members, if you want to pull your chairs around, that's fine. I just want to make sure this is working. All right. So you're up on the Zoom, so you should be good. good.
Okay.
And we can fill all this if you want.
All right. Hi everyone. I'm Lauren Weston. I manage the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District. I'm also here with my colleague Mel Offerdew.
Can I pause you for 1 second? I'm
Yes.
just thinking you're facing away from the mic.
Yes, I am.
So I might just momentarily, without screwing up everything all at once, move a mic over here.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Oh. I'm sorry. I also am on crutches, so I can't stand up and fix this right now. I'm so sorry. That's why I'm here.
For what's worth, I think it's okay. As the guy who sets all this up.
Okay.
Okay.
Wonderful. Yes, so we are just here to kind of present on a year-long project that wrapped up and then what the next steps are, and hopefully get some thoughts back from the select board about approvals for maybe some future projects moving forward, and I will feel free to interrupt me at any point in time as well. And that's in the way, that's okay. So in 2024, we, in partnership with the Select Board and the Conservation Commission in Montgomery, we undertook a flood resilience and hazard mitigation study using funds from the state hazard mitigation flood resilient community funds through Vermont Emergency Management. And we were able to accomplish many things, including a flood study of the Trout River and many of its tributaries, to inform flooding in the village and the center, and then to try to model different alternatives to reduce flood risks throughout the community. And from those, that work of creating an alternatives analysis, we were then able to provide recommended alternatives for that flood reduction, and then some concept designs of the top priority projects. One of the really cool parts of this project was that we were able to subcontract out a couple of flights to collect topographic data using drones. And so they were able to basically shoot lasers down and based on the refraction time figure out what kind of surface type it was, and also get topography to make sure that the model worked really accurately and was with up-to-date data. And that was collected in the spring of '24. From that work, they were able to use some different flood scenarios, and so this is the 50-year flood shown right now, of what would be inundated with floodwaters should you have a 50-year storm. Obviously, we know that we are getting much larger storms than that, but this is just for illustration purposes. And then one of the cool things that they're able to do is to actually model the flooding occurring in hypothetical time, and to really see what areas would be hit the hardest so that we could understand where improvements might be made. Again, from that work, we partnered with an engineering firm who is the they I've been referring to, and I forgot to mention SLR International came and helped do a lot of this work with us. And they identified several locations throughout town, which involved either floodplain restoration, which is literally bringing in heavy equipment and excavating down off of floodplains to reconnect the channel into the floodplain to improve flooding where you want it and to get it away from where you don't want it. As well as bridge replacements or upsizing and overflow culvert additions. So making sure that underneath roads there's more passable area for the floodwaters to go. We had a list of 16 different alternatives that were specifically identified because of the modeling work. And then there's also some future work that involves going a bit more up into the uplands to really make sure that the water coming off of the mountains isn't just being like basically directed straight into the stream, making things worse. And from that list of 16, there were a priority list of about 3 or 4 that ended up really rising to the top. And the one that was most agreed upon by community members who were participating as the logical next step was to explore a floodplain restoration at the town-owned land at 251 Fuller Bridge Road. And so that is right at the bottom of Black Falls Brook and where the Trout River meet. And so it's a very dynamic location for flooding. And what the engineers were able to model was that if you are to over about 4.5 acres, if you're able to cut down between 3 to 7 feet down into that floodplain, about 29,000 cubic yards, you would be able to basically reduce the risk to 118, improve flooding in the village, and really make a big difference with being able to store floodwaters in an area where there aren't homes. So this was a really exciting project that they brought to a 30% design, which is basically a very preliminary level of design. And based on their calculations, they thought that the benefits of doing this type of project would be at least $2.6 million of ecological and flood resilience benefits. And so again, just kind of showing that thick black line that's very straight across horizontally is kind of the cut line that they would propose to excavate down to really enable the stream to come out in a safe place under flood scenarios. And so at this point in time, there's kind of a question to the select board because it is a town-owned parcel. The overall question is, are you interested in continuing to move forward with this project? And if so, there are 2 different potential funding opportunities that we could pursue. One is HMGP, which is hazard mitigation. I'm just gonna own, I don't know what the G stands for right now, but it's hazard mitigation grant program. Thank you. And if we were to pursue that opportunity, in theory, the federal government would pay for 100% of that project. There would be no local cost share at all. And then there's another opportunity that at this point in time we believe would be 90% funded, and so there would be a 10% local cost share, and that's the BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. We can apply to both if you're interested. If you're not interested in this project at all either, we can totally drop it. That's fine by us. So that's kind of the question before the select board is, are you interested in moving forward with that project in particular? And if so, are there any preferred funding sources to move that project forward? Or would you like to explore both opportunities?
I think the reason we were looking at this project is because the town already owns that land.
Right.
And it will help in the village, mitigate a lot of the flooding. And so I think that's why we were looking at that, so we wouldn't have to purchase land. We already own that property, so.
Right.
I think that was some of the reason why we chose that.
Can I do a quick check?
Yeah.
Do you have more visual presentation stuff to cover, or is that?
I was going to talk about the bridge at West Hillbrook if you were interested
Which is
too.
totally fine. If we were going to go into more of a discussion mode, I was going to have the board go back to the mics.
Gotcha. I can quickly present
why don't we do
this
this
next one.
Yeah.
Just one quick question while we were on it.
Yeah.
Both of those funding sources, do you know the max award amounts? Would both of those have a max award amount that would cover the estimated cost of the project?
That is a wonderful question. I am not aware of the max award amount. The current cost estimate is upwards of 1.2 million for the actual work, and no one at Vermont Emergency Management has raised any red flags about that, but I could double check that for you.
Okay. Well, let's keep going with the presentation, and then we'll circle back to board discussion and we'll get questions if that's okay.
Before we
Okay.
move forward, can I ask you, So obviously I see when the applications are due, but what is the thought process behind a timeline that this work would take place if it were funded?
Wonderful question. So the next step would be to do a full final design, and that would probably take at least a year from when the funding gets allocated. And so I think there's a little bit of uncertainty around any federal funding right now. In theory, we would know if this was funded and moving forward by the fall of this year, so there'd probably be at least one more year of design, and then potentially the soonest, if all the permits came through in a timely fashion, you would go to implementation, and that would be 27.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. And that is an optimistic timeline.
Absolutely.
What I can see in a brief search, it doesn't look like the maximum amount is listed.
Okay, thank you, Mel. And then I know, Mark, you and I have been going back and forth about the Route 118 bridge and all of the sediment that builds up underneath it and what to do next. At this point in time, we think the next logical step is to set up a sediment management plan, which would basically involve an engineer going out and really in-depth surveying this bridge and effectively making some plans that the town could easily know based on like measuring how high the sediment is to the top of the bridge, how urgent sediment removal would be. A similar project has been done in Bennington. I did inquire about how they funded that, and as far as the engineer and I can tell, it seems like the town of Bennington was able to use Irene flood money to get that study done, and then they use their own capital funds to do the sediment removal every so often, which is about I guess the surveying to do the sediment costs about $5,000 to $10,000 every year out of their own pocket. We think getting a sediment management plan set up, we think it will cost between $10,000 and $20,000, and we might have a grant that can pay for it. I have to do a little bit more digging, but the grant that I'm thinking of is a flood resilience grant, so we're hoping that that is true. I need to speak to the funders a little bit more about the specific type of project, but basically I've asked around everywhere else, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of other funds for this type of work. So that was the other thing. But with that, I can stop sharing if you guys want to go back to your seats.
Awesome. I don't want to stop you, but if we're going to have more discussion, we can okay, great. Why don't we bring these back up and we'll get the lights back on.
If you would bring the microphone back too.
over here. Thanks.
Do you want to leave it with her since she's going to be answering questions?
I was just gonna say, I think the brick max is 15 million, and that's because they're.
It sounds like
So we don't need to be concerned with the max.
Okay, great. The max award amount for a this is not a concern, so that's good. So it sounds like there's two points of discussion or decision before the board tonight. One is, do we want to continue the process of trying to seek funding for the Fuller Bridge Road site? And does the board want to pursue the sediment management plan for the base of West Hill Brook? So I'll open it up to the board for any thoughts, feelings, opinions.
I have a couple of thoughts on it. First of all, the West Hill Bridge is a problem year after year, big storm after big storm. I think that should be a priority. I don't really have a whole lot of confidence in our federal government administration right now, so I would wonder if there are going to be grant sources this year.
With the Hillisbrook project, there was, at one point, didn't we look into sediment removal, and V-Trans was kind of prohibitive of that process? So is there cooperation from them, and do they have funding contributions to this sort of work?
What the history is there is, back in 2007, the town wanted that to, be cleaned out, and they by V-Trans, and then V-Trans agreed to do it, but then the town signed a contract saying that there would be a one-time thing that V-Trans would pay for. But since then, they've cleaned it out again. They paid for it again in 2014, and then they paid for it again in the Irene storm. So I sent them a message with the, what's that called? The hydraulic study. And they sent me back a message and said, well, we have no interest in doing it. I think if we can get grants to continue the study, and then we can push V-Trans. I really don't see why the town should have to pay for that, because it's a state-owned bridge, and it's affecting our infrastructure, our town infrastructure.
If I recollect properly, did you not have communications with them with regard to the installation of that bridge, and you felt that they should have put something else in because that wasn't going to be high enough? Like, didn't you give them that information?
I went to a couple meetings, and when they were looking at redoing the bridge, and I said, you should be raising this bridge.
Right.
Because it's an issue.
Yeah. That's when we were told they're only redoing the decking, they're not redoing the physical stringers, whatever else you want to call them.
So I think we should continue trying to get the grant money to do the study. And then we can approach V-Trans and say, okay, because part of that contract that we signed said that we would work with regional planning and try to come up with a plan. So we're gonna be doing our part, so they should. But I'm pretty sure they're gonna have to be there in the spring to clean the ice out, because the ice is definitely gonna jam up in that bridge, so. So I feel like we should continue with the study if we can get the grant money.
Yeah.
And then approach V-Trans and say, okay, we've done our part, and now we've got a plan, so that'd be the next step.
And it does look like, as part of what you're presenting, it's not just the study, but it's coming up with a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with V-Trans about how we'll manage it. So the study may help inform what we go to them, try to get an MOU on.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on either one of these projects from board members?
And then Fuller Bridge, I mean, I think we should apply for both of those funding sources and see what happens. See if we can get some of the funding to do it. Because I think it'll really help in the village with the flooding.
Okay, if there's nothing else from the board at this point, I will pause, and if there's no objection, I did see a couple of questions from the audience, and so questions on this topic. Tosca?
I was curious, the Fuller Bridge, when we're talking about that, are we talking about the land by the Riverwalk that Herchbees used to?
Yes.
So have we made sure that we're allowed to do that because it's in the water? 3,500 foot water, like we're allowed to dig up and disturb soils, that's our water source. So I know there's...
I think the area where they're talking about working is outside of the wellhead protection zone.
Right, and we're sure of that, because that would suck.
Yeah, no,
we've got moving down the road.
I recall looking at maps and overlaying things, but I think as part of the next steps with designing the work, we'd have to figure out, what exactly is it we're doing and what is the extent of it, and that would certainly be a big
because our source runs
factor.
right along, it's at that level, so just the drill down for that source is below the level of the river there. So disturbing, that's where the water comes from, so I'd be curious.
Yeah, so there would be, under the current design, there would be no disturbance in the stream at all. It would just be in the floodplain next to it. And the 100% design would definitely answer those questions and have to go through, especially with federal money, you have to go through all the permitting processes. So yes, we would make sure that we're not.
That's my baby that well, so I don't want to do nothing on that.
I understand.
Dan, question?
If it's 100% federally funded, is there any guarantee that the engineers of the program would use local contractors for the dirt work? Like, is that something, would that 1.2 million go to local businesses for the work, or is that federally contracted out as well?
Great question. My understanding what would happen is, so the Franklin County Conservation District would be the project sponsor, and so we would technically be the ones holding all of the money, and we would have to go through a formal procurement process to hire both the engineer and eventually the contractor. And so we would have to follow any federal guidelines around that. In my experience, they've never set anything about it has to be a certain person or anything like that. It's usually the cheapest. So hopefully there'd be somebody local would be the cheapest, but that is typically how those work.
For questions, yeah, Charlie?
So if any of these go through, who's responsible for future maintenance? Would it be the town? And if so, how much?
Yes. Part of what they'll work through in 100% design is figuring out what types of operations and maintenance would be required. So let's say we do cut down 3 to 7 feet, and then over time with floods it builds back up. And so the question would be then, okay, if it does build back up, who's responsible for moving it back out? And that would have to be a conversation between all the stakeholders. There aren't typically funds for operations and maintenance, so we'd have to figure that out.
So in other towns, what have they done?
That's a great question.
I think, based on my experience with some of the floodplain restoration work that I've been involved with, most of the floodplain restoration work is designed in a way where once you restore the floodplain, it essentially functions as a functioning floodplain, so there's very little kind of O&M to do. I think the biggest O&M question would be under the bridge, right? Like, so if we figure out sediment plan and we got V-Trans to agree that allow us to do this, then it's a question of like, so what does it cost annually? And to Mark's point, do we pay for it? Does V-Trans pay for it? So I think that would be worked out through the study, and then through the memorandum of understanding, we would have to establish who's paying for what.
I don't have a good answer for you right now.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I want in that Fuller Bridge restoration, what does that protect? If I remember the flood of '97, which I remember very well, the whole town was whacked between the center and the village. Roads were washed out, and they wouldn't. A lot of local folks wanted them to open some of the channels in the Trout River, and they said no, you can't touch the river. And that whatever happened to the river happened, and that's nature, and they wouldn't let any excavation whatsoever. But this, is the piece that you're talking about is where the town water system is, around there. So if you level that to where you want to level it to satisfy these requirements, what does that do for the town? What does that protect is what I'm asking. There's just the little section around it, it's really not going to affect the center.
Not going to affect the center. I do have a formal, full report on this, and I can certainly send it to anyone who's interested. It won't fix everything by any stretch of the imagination. A big flood's still a big flood. But it'll help on some of the smaller floods. It should alleviate some of the flood depths in the homes in the village, thank you. I'm drawing a little map in my head. In the village, it should alleviate. So instead of 4 feet of flooding, it would be maybe 1 foot of flooding. But no, it won't fix everything.
But as you notice, that whole corner by that 118 bridge is all almost plugged up, so that would help alleviate the water going into the village.
The difference, Mark, is astronomically small. The Black Lantern had not a drop of water in the basement. The building next to it that we own was up to the first floor.
Yeah.
And they're right next to each other. On a naked eye, it looks level. Obviously, it wasn't, but I don't, how do you know? It just happens.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that it would definitely accomplish is slowing down the velocities of the water in the channel, so the chances of eroding 118 in some of those areas would decrease. But a big storm is still a big storm.
I'll also say, as far as our organization, we're thinking of this as the first step to continue to do this work on other parcels of interested landowners to continue to decrease those damages. So hopefully, cumulatively, it'll start to make a difference. And for the landowners who this project will help, that would be important in itself.
Great. Did I see one other question? Yeah.
Funding with the grant, with the president freezing everything, how is that gonna affect this?
I would love to give you an answer.
Because that's all up in the air right now, and it probably will be for a while.
Yes, and so I guess my current understanding of the current state of things is that these funds were appropriated by Congress already, and in theory are untouchable. But it's a brand new world, so I don't know. It doesn't hurt to apply.
Yeah, that's what
I think at this point, that's
about what we're
we're just
doing.
applying, so
Right.
if the funds aren't there,
We don't know.
the answer we get is no.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
There's no obligation if we apply and receive the funding.
Well,
So
if
there will
we-
be a full contracting phase
Right.
with the grant, and that'll be months away. And so if by then you're feeling uncertain about it and you don't want to commit,
Yeah.
we don't have to sign anything.
Yeah, I think we're many steps before
Yeah.
any decision point like that.
Right before any obligation comes.
Correct.
Yes.
So what would be the harm in applying?
I don't see one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that if we were doing this, what I'd say the harm would be is the time it takes one of us at the table to write these grants, which are not simple. And so I think the harm would be that the conservation district puts a bunch of time into something and that we don't move forward with on. But if you're willing to take that risk, for lack of a better word, I think we'd appreciate it.
We'd love to.
Yeah.
We're just trying to help anywhere we can.
Well, it sounds like from the conversation that we're having and the questions we're answering, the consensus seems to be developing on the board, I might be wrong, that we are looking to move forward with both of the studies that you presented. I think obviously if there's an opportunity to get something funded with no match, we'd rather do the no match. But again, if we can apply to both sources and see what happens, that's good.
Okay.
And then if there's money to do the sediment reduction survey under the bridge, I think we're in favor of going forward with that, because that would kind of inform any next steps with the state around an MOU and actual work there. Do you need any kind of affirmative action or motion from the board tonight, or is the general consensus direction good? What takeaway do you need?
I do need a formal like landowner agreement, basically as the landowner. I do have 2 drafted for the Fuller Bridge Road, and I can share with you guys to review. I don't have one drafted for the sediment management yet, but I can forward that in email if that's helpful. Email. Sorry. Thank you. There should be 5 copies of both there, and then also my card if you're interested, and if you have any questions at any point in time. Thanks.
Thank you.
So just take one of each and pass it on.
And the only difference between those 2 letters is the 3rd to last sentence, I believe, that says which funding source is which.
Oh,
Okay. Yep. I'm also happy to send that as an email if that's easier.
Okay, so I think essentially it's a letter of engagement with the conservation district to pursue this.
Yes.
Again, the key is the 3rd paragraph, the funding. So I would make a motion that the board move to direct the Franklin County Natural Resource Conservation District to pursue on our behalf both the HMGP and BRIC programs to support funds associated with flood mitigation in the village.
I'll second that.
We have a second from Mark. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. And then we don't have a formal letter in front of us, but I would further move that the select board partner with and direct the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District to pursue opportunities to fund a sediment reduction plan at West Hill Brook. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries and it's adopted. Great, so we'll get you signed copies of this back, and if you end up with something that you need signed more formally for the West Hill Bridge work, let us know, we'll get it to you.
Wonderful.
But that
Thank
should,
you all very much.
that in the record should
Thank you too.
work.
Thank
with
you
us.
for your work.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you.
We do have 2 more cards. If anybody else would like to contact me at any point in time, we'll leave them over there.
Great. With that, we're gonna pick up on item 4 on our agenda. So this is Public Works. First item under Public Works is the municipal wastewater project updates. First update under this is just related to the easements. And so as we talked about before, the plan is to send out essentially an easement option to all landowners, which is asking them to convey an easement to the town to maintain and operate the wastewater infrastructure. There was some confusion, I guess, in talking with folks after this. So what we're looking to do is initially get an option for an agreement, not an actual deed of the easement. And that is so that should something happen and the project not go forward, we don't have all these easements on the books. The option gives us the ability to go and get the easement, but it does not convey the easement again, so that we don't have all the easements on the books should something go sideways and that not work out. So the plan is to send out the option agreement to all landowners. At this point, the plan now is to get those out next month. And then get them back, hopefully from landowners by April 21st. We'll notify folks when they go out. We'll probably also try to hold some sort of public information meeting for landowners so that they can ask questions about the material that they receive. And we'll also try to develop some other kind of supporting FAQs just to help assist landowners. It's not to sidestep or do anything to preclude an individual from working with their own counsel or attorneys or anything else, but try to provide as much information as we can to make the folks understand what we're asking for simpler. So that's the plan with the easements. The other update here is around going to bid. So we've been delayed by the state and their review of things. So at this point, the hope was to get out to bid as soon as possible. At this point, we're probably not going to go to bid until April 1st or directly after that. And then it's about a 2-month window to get bids fully received that we can respond to. So that's the current timeline for going to bid on the project. When you kind of follow that chain down, that means that any work in 2025 would be relatively limited to late in the season, probably just work up on the disposal field site on 242, with the bulk of the work happening in 2027, and then any final steps on 26, and then any final steps happening in 2027. So that's the update on when we're planning to go to bid as far as the timeline goes. We also did, as it's been discussed before, with the service area and looking at budgets and cost of connections, we did work things back through with the engineer to come up with what we want to go to bid for based on the planned costs and expectations. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And so I only have one map of this tonight, but we can share it out to people. But the current extent of the service area as built, I clarify as built because extensions can come off of it at any future point if the system wants to be expanded. But the extent of it as built that will go to bid for day one connections would be down 118 just past the rec center in that direction. It would go up to just before Purrier Farm Road, up 242. The disposal facility, big leach field, is up on that property. That's the extent there. Going up 242, it would go more...
58.
Sorry, going up 58. It would go more or less to the base of the hill, which I believe is property that you guys own at this point. I think we know what number it is?
216.
216.
The house right across from the swimming hole access?
Yeah, the blue.
Below it.
Okay.
It will not go up farther than that at this point because the cost of connection gets too high, and there's also some boring under 242 that is pretty expensive. 58. God. Sorry, my brain is starting to do that thing at the end of the day where it doesn't remember numbers. And then down 118 south, it would go just beyond Benosh Farm Road, but it would not extend farther south down to the residences that get you down to where Brent's house is, for lack of a better location. So that's currently the proposed day one service area that we're going to go to bed with. The bid will be structured in a way.
You said to the rec center.
Yes, just beyond the rec
Just
center.
beyond the rec center.
I don't have
Jesse's.
Like
Jesse's would be, yeah.
Okay.
The numbers I have on here aren't road numbers.
We go down Begnosh Road?
But down Benosh Farm Road, yes. That whole area, yep. So we can make this public, get it out to people, but that's the verbal description of what we're looking at. And then the bid will be phased, as we talked about before, into different phases, so that depending on how things come back, things can be trimmed further, and also bidding it in different sections is a bid strategy that I guess they use to try to get better bids on each section. I've been told. So those are the updates that I've got on the wastewater project for tonight. Are there any questions from the board on any of those updates? No. We've got 2 more things before visitors, but if there's no objection, just because this tends to be a topic folks like to talk about, we can pause here for any questions from visitors on this project. Anybody have any objections to that?
No.
No.
All right, then at this point, if anybody has any questions on the project from the audience, now would be a time to ask them. We'll go to the room first, and then we can go to the Zoom second, if that works. Yeah, Kim, I guess I'll go to you first, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. At the last meeting, I asked about strings that were attached to the funding that came with the wastewater. And there's been a whole lot of information about fear-mongering and untruths. But I have a few things, and I just want to clarify, because housing is a huge issue, and we have agreed that we need housing in Montgomery. And I'm just really curious as to the avenue that we're taking and what putting this wastewater system in is going to look like for the town as a whole moving forward. 249 million housing recovery plan, historic funding for permanent housing for the homeless was granted through the Scott administration. Through the CCRP municipal applicants, which we applied for through the Rural Development Program, it states right in there that that program will award grants to municipalities to assist in funding water supply or wastewater that will result in new affordable housing as defined in 24 VSA 4303. And then that puts us into one of the 4 development programs through the state. And with that is the mixed income housing. I have copies of our initial application for funding through the Rural Development Program, which is rolled over into the Neighborhood Development Program, and I know that those funds were rolled over into the state loan forgivable. I'm on the spot, I can't remember the language.
So I think
Charlie, I'm wondering why we're not talking about the big picture. I don't hear people arguing that we don't necessarily want or need a wastewater system, but there's a big picture involved here, and why aren't we talking about it?
So I guess first off, I'll say that there's a number of different funding things and programs that you just talked about there, and I guess if you have a question specifically on one, I can help answer it. I think some of the things you were talking about aren't necessarily tied together. Like the funding does not necessarily put you into a neighborhood development district. I mean, those kinds of like village downtown designations, those are things that towns enter into voluntarily. So like having a wastewater system would not like put you into that program unless the town voted to designate something that way. So some of them are connected in that, like, to be this, you have to do that, but they're not directly tied together to that way.
But having a wastewater system does put the town at the top of the priority list for the additional funding sources
Additional funding sources for what?
for development.
What funding sources for development?
Hang on, that's a different paper.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that because this gets really complicated given the number of funding sources, state programs, and a lot of these things work in the same area, but they're not necessarily tied together. So I just want to make sure when we talk about things being hitched to something else, we're really deliberate and clear about what it is we're talking about.
Okay.
Wouldn't that also preclude that the town owns property that they would then be using funds to create housing? Like, isn't that the tie also?
Well, there's different programs. You know, there's.
But like, if we accept all this federal funding for this wastewater project, we can't twist landowners' arms and say you have to put low-income housing or whatever. Like, a landowner's going to do what they're going to do with their land.
So we can't control development on private property.
Exactly.
Now, to Kim's point about like the CRRP funding, those awards are made to communities with the intent of spurring commercial development, housing development, and things like that. So the intent of certain programs is certainly related to some of the stuff we're talking about. But to your point, if it's a private parcel, we cannot direct what they do on it, as opposed to, for example, like what St. Albans has done in a couple of projects where they've actually acquired property and then done something to give it, well, in one case they gave it to a developer for $1, I think, to spur affordable housing in that spot. So yes, there's different structures depending on that. And to your bigger question about the bigger picture, I guess I would say, you know, this whole thing came from a discussion of a bigger picture. It was done out of a Vermont Council on Rural Development community visit process that got people together to talk about the big priorities. If folks remember, there was like 27 ideas around a room. We narrowed them down as a town over the course of 3 meetings. These were like 4-hour affairs in the evenings. And this was the priority that the town put forward: wastewater, streetscapes, and cell service or broadband. And as we've kept going, I'd like to think that we talk about the big picture. And I certainly hope that we're not discouraging that. So I guess I'd say if there's another place, avenue, means to do that, I think we're open to it.
My name is Claudia.
Claudia.
I
Yeah.
have a quick question. You mentioned that the initial wastewater system has those perimeters that you mentioned with the option to add on to it. And so that could potentially mean that it goes way past the rec center towards the village, right?
So
It opens the door to that, let me put it that way.
it could mean that in the future the system is expanded in any manner that the town at that point would like to, that is financially feasible. But I'd equate it to like the water system. When the water system went in, the day one connections of the water system were not what currently are the connections. Over time, the system's grown, other connections have come in. So it'd be the same kind of process there. But again, it depends on intent of the community, but also funding and money. You know, to go all the way up and connect, say, Alan's house wouldn't make any sense because it's way the heck over there, and the cost of connection is way more than what it would be, you know, for the project. So there's limiting factors there as well.
I think the main concern of people like me, I mean, I went on the hill, I live on the hill, we don't, you know, we're not connected in the town. But the main concern is that it potentially opens doors, the wastewater system, and a potential extension to it, and grants that could come with development. That is a door that can't be shut again. And that would change the character of Montgomery. And I say that, I really want to, it's really important to me because we moved here from Morrisville, and Morrisville was quite a quaint town when I moved there 20 years ago. And now we're gonna it was in tiny little steps. It didn't happen in one giant step. It started with little, you know, let's extend the airport, which I was part of because it became eminent domain that on my property, so they could extend the airport when initially they said, we won't extend the airport, and now it's getting extended, you know. And so across from the airport now, they are literally gonna take away a little mountain in order to put a huge industrial park in.
Yeah.
And so, and I actually called the police last week, and the crime rate went up from 21 to 23 by 126%.
In Morris?
In Morrisville.
Yeah, so I think
In 2 years.
a couple things. One, I guess can't respond to hypotheticals. I mean, anything could happen, and I guess there's an argument to be made that if you take one step in one direction, it makes taking another step easier.
Right.
Or you give a mouse a cookie, he's gonna want some milk. I don't know what metaphor you want to use, but we could go down any route of hypotheticals that we want to, but I don't think that's productive. Second, we are not Morrisville. I understand the comparison that you're making, but we're not Morrisville. And then as far as the increase in crime over that time period goes, I think that there's an element of correlation and causation, and I guess not having full crime data statistics on what happened and when and why, I think that to kind of say something like an increase in crime was the result of a wastewater system might be a bit of a stretch.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that with development and with more people comes more crime.
Yeah. So over that
Yeah.
same time period, we saw an explosion in the drug crisis and fentanyl use. I mean, we saw a lot of things happen. So I take what you're saying, and we had this conversation at the last meeting where you can make an argument that if on average 1 out of 100 people is a criminal, every 100 people you add one more criminal. I mean, you could kind of make that argument, but again, I don't know what we're trying to draw in terms of parallel here, that creating more housing would create population, which would inherently drive up crime.
It's just the experience that I'm bringing with me to Montgomery.
Okay, understood.
And I love this little town so much. I mean, I can't even tell you how happy we are to be here, because we no longer like what happened in Morrisville. We no longer like that we can't leave the car unlocked there, and that the town has lost its charm. And Montgomery is an incredibly charming little place. And it has it has a community still, which Morrisville is losing by the day because of a lot of development and because the little businesses are suffering actually from it, and the big businesses are moving in, which is never a good thing. You know, all the little places that are so precious and so wonderful. And yes, you say it has nothing to do with the wastewater system, but it's a door that gets open. And I'm not saying that the people in town shouldn't have a great wastewater system. I would never say that. If they need it, they need it. But I think there should be a cap on it so it doesn't balloon out of control. You know, and with you saying it could be added onto, that opens the door for a lot more potentially. So I think if we would say at this point, we're gonna give it to the people in town that need it and want it.
Yeah.
Like Bradford doesn't want it, he just got a new septic, you know? But if they want it, then yes, they should have it, but to put a cap on it and say,
Yeah.
that's the end of it.
Understood. And just to be clear, there is a cap on it to the point that the capacity of the system we're building, it does have a cap. So just to make it clear, it's not an unlimited amount of connections that can go onto that.
And how many more connections could go onto it though?
It's not based on number of connections, it's based on overall volume of wastewater flow.
Right.
So, Tosca, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna point out, as a former business owner on Main Street, in 2008, and many years ago when I was working on the water, septic was a priority after the 1997 flood. Then the water shit the bed in the village, so that became the priority. The water system took over 12 years to get done. The septic is gonna take, we started, 6 years ago when we started the process and said, so we're now 2027. These processes are long, they change in scope. But back to the quaint businesses on Main Street, without septic, legally, Bernie's only has 35 seats.
I'm not
Trout
saying
River Traders legally can only seat 22 people. The Grange Hall that we love to fill up with 150, if they did an actual study on the water usage, we would maybe be able to put 50 people in chairs in there. So the septic is important for growing the businesses that already exist, and I'm sorry Bernie's had to put his system in. It sucked. I wish it could have happened sooner. I wish the septic were put in 10 years ago. But the fear mongering that Herchabees is all of a sudden gonna sell its land between the center and the village and put up 400 apartment buildings
Who the hell said
is
that?
ridiculous. I'm hearing it from planning commission people. So I'm just kind of like, slow down. Everything takes time, and it takes a long time. And you guys have jumped in midstream, and I totally respect the questions, but this process is gonna change, and it takes a long time. So either you want septic or you don't, but picking and choosing who gets it and who wants it never works in these systems, because you have to have the volume to support it. And it's on, I don't know, it's my 2 cents, but right now, every business on Main Street is operating illegally.
I'm not against the septic system,
So,
I'm not
but I'm
against the
saying-
wastewater. Tosca, I'm not against
Because they
the
don't
wastewater
have
system.
wastewater
Guys, I don't wanna-
permits
They don't
for
need
capacity.
wastewater.
Okay,
They're
time out.
pre-existing.
Let's guys,
Not one of them
let's,
needs
we're not gonna talk over each other.
Anyway.
We're not gonna talk over each other.
If they want to push it, yes.
Thank you, Tosca.
Sorry. I just think we all need to.
Thanks. Anyone else in the room have questions or, yep?
My question is, like, being familiar with septic, what is the capacity that we're proposed at building?
Yeah. I don't have that at the tip of my fingers, but I can try to pull that up.
I feel like at one point you said it was like, based on the average now, it's like 50 now.
Well, that's how we came up with the number, but the actual, it's based on gallons of flow per day. And I don't, if you give me a minute or two, I can try to look that up.
Just at
Yeah.
some point this evening.
Yeah. Other questions in the room? Yeah.
When I first purchased here in 2021, I was under the impression that we were continuing through the village. What I have noticed that has continued through the village in the Trout River itself is quite a bit of bacteria. As we're saying, we're kind of over capacity already. The thought is, are we gonna continue? Because there's quite a bit of residences on the way down. Now, if we're talking about proposed development in town, what's that add to the current problem that we're already facing? The idea is floodwaters, and it just keeps eroding and eroding. Well, even if we have septic in the center, but we don't have it in the village, how much land do those those homeowners, how much land do they have to spare before their septic is literally in the river?
Asking specifically about the village or
And
specifically?
like, the idea is, what would be the cost to, say, branch off of this, like, say the center being the trunk of the system, branching off for a development behind, or like the village, what's the cost comparison?
Yeah,
You
so
know what I'm saying?
So the village would need to be a completely separate, well, to make it economically viable in terms of design and everything else, the village would need to be a completely separate system, just given the distance between the two center and the village. We did look to pursue a system for the village. We weren't able to acquire a disposal field, a site that would allow for the tertiary treatment or whatever, the big ass leach field. So that plan is potentially pinned. We've got a lot of work behind it, so if at some point in the future somebody said, hey, I own this piece of land that'll work, do you guys want it? The town could, at that point, move to create a system there. So that's the limiting factor in the village. As far as in the center goes, I guess I'm not sure I understand the question. What's the limiting
I
factor?
was just looking, like, cost comparison, but if it's literally a separate system because of distance.
Yeah, it would be a separate system because of the distance between the two and the infrastructure it would take to connect them, and then the capacity that we would need at the sites for the treatment. So we would need to have it much cheaper to connect the two, and the treatment location would have to have much larger capacity than we can physically get in that
Right.
place, if that makes sense.
I mean, I moved up from Massachusetts, and literally the town I lived in, we didn't have a wastewater system. It was piped through another town, and the next town over treated it.
For treatment, yeah.
So, I mean, as far as getting from point A to point C, it is possible.
Yeah, and you can, and so like the way this system is designed is that the treatment is essentially the literal effluent treatment. So it's like a large disposal field. The individual properties will have tanks that will essentially hold sludge, the solids. So those tanks will get pumped periodically, and that waste will actually get trucked to a place that will process that. So to your point, yeah, there's different ways to do it. It's just a case of figuring out what's the most economical way to do it. And I did find it, I think, if I'm looking at the right number, the planned gallon per day flow for the center is around 35,000 gallons per day. That's the design flow, if I have my spreadsheet correct. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, have you done the math on how much water the center's using, that portion of the center uses now? I mean, you have all that data.
Yeah.
You got everybody's water bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now, average daily water plant production is around 25,000 gallons per day.
Yeah.
So
does that mean you have 10,000 extra gallons per day than what we're using now?
Are you asking about water or wastewater?
Capacity for your wastewater.
So we're building the capacity of the system to accommodate 10,000 more gallons a day. Yep. Yeah, Charlie.
So I want to go back to the TOS. It mentioned something, and I think you're right in some areas. So the problem with the wastewater that I see people concerned about is the lack of communication, clear, concise, open line of communication. This is the problem that people are having. There's a bill that had, Act 181 came out, and they posted it on January 1st, and it says that if you have 10 acres of land and you're able to connect to a wastewater system, you can put a maximum of 50 units of affordable housing on your property. This is, I think, one of the heart of the issues that people are having, is that there's not enough back and forth communication. There's a lot of chatter, but there's not enough communication to clear this up. And so you're seeing a lot of people get mad and frustrated at this. I think we need to rehash this and just lay all the cards out on the table right now. Is squash all the miscommunication that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I wish that we could have no miscommunication and everything that we say is factually accurate. That would be phenomenal. I also wish that, and I know this is not, I know everyone can't attend every meeting or read everything that's posted. I will say the board has tried, perhaps we have not gotten it right, but tried to communicate information out as best we can. And certainly provide materials when folks want them. I mean, I have physically printed off engineering plans and driven them to folks' houses for them. If we can do better, then we will do better. If there's ideas of how we can do better, we will. To the Home Act and Act 181, back in September of last year, we did have both our zoning administrator and regional planning do a look at our current zoning bylaws and what the changes in Act 181 would mean. And we got that back and we've reviewed them at meetings, and then we can go through it again if people want. We can make a summary, attach it to the minutes. I mean,
I really think the communications are number one priority, because this is gonna tear the town apart. It's already doing it. You can see fractures already.
yeah, no, I agree. And I think communication is key. I think communication of accurate information is also key, to your point. And so if there's more ways that we can help get that out and dispel inaccuracies or limit confusion, I mean, you have no disagreement from this board, I don't think.
If the wastewater goes in, and it's always a connection between wastewater and affordable housing. That's the problem with everything. Is there a way that the town can limit the amount of units an affordable housing complex can have?
No.
Is there a way a town can limit the amount of affordable housing units a town can have?
Yep, if the wastewater goes in, so that's the key thing
I
that
mean-
everybody sees, is wastewater equals affordable housing. So if you can minimize one, would that not help dispel a lot of the problems?
I think our limit is where the wastewater system's going in, there isn't much open land anyways. I mean, where the system is actually going in.
Is there any 10-acre lots on Main Street? Sorry.
So, can we not, let's not crosstalk, that's when things get hard to hear. I guess I don't know enough to answer your question 100% definitively. I know that towns cannot put what they commonly refer to as exclusionary zoning in. So towns are limited in terms of, they can't say, like,
No trailer.
we don't want mobile homes in our community. You can't do that. There are processes through conditional use review and things like that where we have the ability to kind of, shape certain development. I don't know, to your exact question, can the town put a cap on the number of affordable housing units? I don't know that. I can try to find out though.
I think that would probably help a lot of the problems going on. Because people hear wastewater treatment facility and they don't know what size it is, what its capabilities are, the percentage that you can add to it. Are they gonna add another 30,000 gallons to it to be able to capacity in order for the town to grow to be a Morrisville, right? So maybe we should get the numbers out there and say, hey, this is only a wastewater treatment facility that will be, for so many units and that's it. And we can't afford to put a 50-unit complex in or a 30-unit complex in.
So I think two things you're getting at. One is a policy question around what the town can and cannot do as far as legally influencing the kind of building, and the other is a capacity question. And so if we can get more information out about capacity, let's think about how best to do that. That sounds like where you're going with that other one, is with capacity, what could happen?
So, on another side though, is people who are putting in their new septics, there's a few people, Bernie's did it and Snowshoe did it. Are they required to tap in? Is everybody required to tap in, even though you have your own?
Yeah, so the way this has been designed, discussed from more or less the get-go, is that in order for the affordability of the user fees to work, everyone's gotta be a part of the system.
So that septic they put in is null and void, they spent
So in the case of Bernie's and the Snowshoe, it's not completely null and void. We've been working with the engineers to figure out what parts of systems can get reused specifically with those two properties, and then what compensation would essentially roll back to the landowner. We don't have fixed numbers on that yet, but that is the intent, where you have relatively new infrastructure to maintain and retain what we can for use.
Okay. And then, so the people who have the property but don't want to give up the easement, that opens up a court situation where you actually come in and you take that land legally, right? Is that the other?
Eminent domain.
Isn't that the other action you're going towards?
So I think legally the term is condemnation, but what would happen is that the landowners, the way this process works is that the landowners who don't sign the easement or return it, the town would then basically go to Superior Court and say, look, we need everyone to connect to this system. We've done through the commercial appraisal, figured out the value of the easements, we've gone through these process, here's what we're doing. We would like a judgment that basically says, yeah, you guys gotta provide this easement to connect you to the system. And that's how that would work. But again, without that, it creates a scenario whereby the potential number of users to support the system drops to a point where the individual user fee spikes to a point where it's just completely unaffordable. It's just a case of the pie and how many slices come out of it. And that was the rationale from the get-go behind that decision. I want to get people who haven't had a chance to speak yet. Suzanne?
I was just doing some numbers here. You were talking about how I think the cap you said was 38,000 gallons per day on
the full capacity, I believe, is
35. 35. Okay, that's
Yeah.
even less. So that if you divide that up, I had 38, so I'm a little off, but the average was about 250 gallons per user per day. And if you take the balance from that 35,000 and the 28,000, it's around 50 units you could add to the system in theory. So if you, and this is an average, again, this is not saying exactly 50 units or not, but 50 units on this system. That's apartments, houses, restaurants, brewery, like whatever you want to do. So a business is going to generally have a larger water footprint than a studio apartment. So, I mean, it's not like you're not putting in 12, story apartment buildings with 30 units in them, because that alone, one building, would completely override the capacity of the system. So if you think of it in that context, this isn't like an open door to just be like, yes, let's throw up a dozen apartment buildings. It's physically impossible for this system to accommodate that.
So there is, just to your point, there is a, so your main point of different things take different amounts of water, and so the calculations we use are based on equivalent residential units, ERUs. And so something like the snowshoe would be many multiple ERUs as opposed to a residential property would be like one ERU. And then as far as future connections go, this will be within the ordinance itself, but because there is a limit to capacity, when projects come before the water or the wastewater commission to connect, they have to essentially say, here's what we're looking to build, here's what the planned projected flow rates are documented here, and then the town would essentially have to say, through the process outlined in the ordinance, we've got X capacity left, yes, we're going to grant you X capacity for this project. I only say that because, like, there will become a point if this gets built and build out happens at scale where the town will have to say, hey, we've got X capacity left, this project wants to come in and use all of it, as opposed to we could have X smaller things. And so that's the process by which capacity will be doled out, for lack of a better.
It's not only the capacity of the wastewater system, it'd be the capacity of the water system too. Yeah. The water system's got a limit of how many we can add on too.
So
and that's a process by which the select board and the water commission and the DRB all collectively have an input on. It's not like an overlord government that's like deciding those factors. That's our community that's deciding those things. Who you elect to these seats is the people that will make these decisions. So it's not like a stranger somewhere deciding what's best for Montgomery. It's still the people before you.
So we can, through policy, we can limit what we're doing, not, because if we don't have a policy to limit some of this stuff, it'll go out of hand. Everyone's gonna be fighting for something. So by policy, like we were saying, we can limit amount of the affordable housing coming in.
So that's what I think we're drawing connections between things that I don't think we can fully draw connections between yet. And so through this process, I think the ordinance would essentially say, this project wants X capacity, here's the capacity we have, is that an appropriate use of capacity? I don't think that legally someone could come forward with a project and we could say, because of the nature of your project, we're not gonna grant you capacity.
For the demographic it serves.
But again, I will go back and look at, to your question of can the town cap the number of affordable housing units? 'Cause I really don't know the answer to that, because there's multiple things that kind of feed into that. Anybody who has not asked a question in the room yet before I go to the Zoom?
I want to bring back Claudia's point in that you were asking about extending the system, and I obviously there would have to be a policy drafted about how that would proceed. It
sorry.
obviously like is not a unilateral decision.
But you should also just say that like future connection to the system, those are not going to be paid for through the project, and so if somebody wanted to connect to the system that was super far away, the economics of that connection would fall on the landowner.
Yeah.
Just in case that wasn't clear. Sorry.
At this point, though, there is not a policy written with regard to the system as far as extending the system further, or like how that would take place.
The ordinance would dictate kind of what new connection process is and how that would be handled.
And so that could be written as the town has to vote on it. Hypothetically.
Not per connection.
Not per connection, but to extend the system to really increase capacity or the scope of the project.
So we wouldn't be increasing capacity, it would be
Sorry,
just connecting
wrong word.
to the existing system. I mean, we're kind of going down some pretty big hypothetical rabbit holes here.
No,
I don't.
What I was trying to say, right now we will get a system, let's say, for 35,000 gallons, right? That's the proposed size?
If I'm looking at the right numbers here, I believe that is,
Okay,
if not an accurate number, it's within the
Right.
slight ballpark of it.
So, what Emily said would be really nice, if we ever decide that there should be a bigger system, let's say 50,000, that then it gets put up for vote again.
Oh, well, yes.
That's what that's what I'm asking, and
No,
I guess
mean,
I'm asking
if-
about like
if-
capacity, but also geography too, because that was
Yeah.
what you were bringing up as well, right? Extending the system past like
Oh,
the
yeah.
geographical measures of what Charlie has on this map, which is tiny and you can't see.
Yeah, so yeah, if we were to increase capacity of the overall system, that would be the scale of project where we would be going out to bond, we'd be going
It would
through
be
all of
before the
same-
voters.
Yeah, so there
It'd be a whole
would be,
repeat of this process that we've been through.
well, hopefully not.
This has been fun.
Yeah, anyway, so
But
that's,
it's
yeah. I wanna go, sorry, yes.
I got two things. I got one question and I got one thing to tell Charlie. You said you got money from Bernie Sanders. Do you have that or is that froze?
No.
This whole government thing.
So it was a congressionally directed spending request, which is through the Environmental Protection Agency, and the guidance we've received from everybody there that we talk to on a regular basis is the money's there, it's been obligated, apply for it, it's there, it's ready.
But I saw, you said you got 2 something million from Bernie.
That was the congressionally directed spending request, so it was an earmark that was put in a bill to go directly for this purpose, so it's obligated and earmarked in the EPA's.
So it's not froze.
Our understanding is it's not frozen. I mean, at this point, like, I'm not gonna speculate on what's gonna happen in the next 24 hours, but like,
I know that.
we've been told that that money is there, it's been obligated, that they can't reabsorb it, and
You never know about that.
we're
one either.
working through them right now to basically take the final steps to punch the green light on it.
Charlie, I wanna let you know, April 1st, we had a petition going around, and we got a date for April 1st, that we can either opt out, that was number 2. The first one is to get rid of the sales tax, so then they can't fund this. So that's coming up April 1st. But then there's gonna be another one on town meeting day for get rid of the 1%, but yet you're gonna still pay for the alcohol in the rooms. That wasn't made clear to everybody, that's why I'm, right?
So just to be clear, so what's, the vote on April 1st is to rescind the entire part of the charter that involves the local option tax, so we get rid of every part of the local option tax. the vote on town meeting day is to institute a local option tax on just rooms and meals, not sales, through a process that the legislature enacted last year, which basically said communities no longer need to go through the charter process to institute a local option tax. The way that the state laws have been up until last year was that to do a local option tax, the community had to adopt a charter that had the local option tax in it. The charter would then have to work through both houses of the legislature and get signed by the governor in order for it to go into effect. The changes that the state put in place said essentially you don't need a charter, you don't need to work through a charter to do a local option tax. Essentially, you just do it by the regular course of action at a meeting, and depending on the town you're in, you're either a floor town or an Australian ballot town. We can go down that rabbit hole if you want. But that's how it would happen. It would be put into effect through a different mechanism than a charter.
So what would be, so if we have the option tax that we already passed, which would be 1%, right?
Right now, there's a 1% tax on sales, rooms, and meals.
Okay. So if that stays on the board, is the other one still on the table as well?
If what stays on the board is what?
The one that's already voted in, the options tax we have. Will the other tax also be implemented as well?
If the tax on the local option tax passes on town meeting day, which is enacted through a separate process than a charter, that also involves suspending the municipal charter for a period of 3 years, which essentially would let us go back and do whatever we want to it, mediate it, scratch it, but it gives you 3 years to basically go back and do whatever you need to do to clean the charter up.
So the thought process I'm getting at is that because we have these tariffs going on, we have a tariff war going on, the governor wants to increase taxes this year, he's already said it. And then we're paying another option tax, and then we're paying another option tax on top of that. At what point does tax not become an answer to our problems? Never. Because everyone's going to be feeling it in their pocket as far as what's going on nationally and by the state, right? So I think we need to start pumping the brakes a little bit on this answer for taxes being the cure-all. But the other part I wanted to jump on is that if we're getting enough money for everyone to pay for this, because we have a loan coming out, right, to pay for the wastewater, the people, and everyone's going to be paying into it through the options tax, everything, right? So the people who want to build something and attach to this wastewater, will they have a buy-in of say $5,000 or $10,000 that they have to up front to help pay this loan off, or are they just going to go scot-free and just hook up to it?
And tax fee.
Yeah, so a few things there. One is, I think the question of the whole, like, what about taxes is a bigger one than tonight. The board, looking at what the tax receipts have been to date and taking into account, the fact that the sales tax hits everybody in town as opposed to, say, the rooms tax, which, in theory, no one here would be paying that because you're not staying in a hotel or an inn. In response to that, the board put forward an alternative which says, hey, given what we're seeing, we could drop the sales tax portion, still have enough revenue to do what we need to do. So acknowledging, like, if we can reduce the tax burden on the community by some degree, here's an alternative that would do that. As far as the connections go, the way that the system is designed and funded and everything, day one connections to it, there's no cost of connection for the individual property owner. The property owner would then be subject to future user fees, which would be calculated based on usage and stuff. But the actual day one connection, there's no money that changes hand for that connection. Future connections, per an ordinance that we develop, probably would have a cost of connection, similar to connecting to the water system. But no, day one connections, they're not going to be handed a bill that says...
Day one is assuming that it's everybody in town right now.
Day one is like...
I just meant new development coming in that wants to connect in
so
20 or 30 years.
So new development,
Right.
any new development that comes after, there would be a connection fee and a fee structure that we'd have to set up.
Right.
So, all right, I do see Daniel's hand up, and then I want to go to the Zoom. Go ahead.
For the future editions, would that reduce the user fee for everyone else on there? Presuming that the user fee is like the carry cost of it currently. If more people are on it, everyone's user fees hypothetically would go down.
Yeah. I mean, the user fees are based on operations and maintenance and debt service, and if there's more people contributing to that,
Yeah.
the individual cost would go down.
And then the second thing on the local option tax, is there any situation in which there's two local option taxes at the same time? Because there's the one that's already in place,
There
the
would
1%.
not be a scenario where there's two at the same time unless 3 years go by and we haven't changed the charter.
Okay.
Because so this gives you 3 years to go back and change the charter. So if we do it outside the charter, then we've got 3 years to go back. All right, I do want to go to the Zoom because people have been kind of patient there. At this point, if anyone would like to speak or ask a question, please just raise your hand either physically in front of the camera or use your remote hand. Okay, Merle, I saw Merle's hand go up first. Merle, do you want to?
He's ready.
I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Did you say speaking on this project?
Yes, speaking to this.
No, I have not.
Okay, thanks, Merle. Larry, I saw your hand up.
Just a real quick question. If your proposal for town meetings day concerning the option tax change, charter change, is passed, and then on April 1st, the option tax is denied by the voters, does one override the other?
They don't necessarily override each other because they happen through different mechanisms, but I think to the point of your question, if on town meeting day, the town decides to institute a tax outside of the charter on rooms and meals, that would then go into effect as a tax outside of the charter. If the charter amendment passes and gets rid of the local option tax within the charter, there would still be a local option tax on rooms and meals because it's set up outside of the charter vehicle.
Second question, only going back to the village, two questions. What happened to the Tim Murphy property that was offered?
So Tim did offer us a property. The soils and the hydrogeology going on that site just didn't work for the capacity that we needed. I mean, it was a big enough property, but when we looked at the soil maps, and I believe they actually went out and did some preliminary holes in the ground, it's just a combination of soils, adjacency to floodplain, I believe. It just wasn't big enough and suited for the capacity.
And the center cemetery property that we had looked at?
There is still potentially land up there that could function for potential capacity at some point, but there's no plan at this point to utilize any of that land up there for this purpose.
Why is that?
We don't need it.
But we didn't have to pay for it either.
So compared to the 242 site, which we did have to purchase, the 242 site had a much greater capacity. So initially there was a question of, do we need multiple sites to have the capacity that we're looking at given the initial work we did to determine the capacity we're going towards? The 242 site and the work we did there basically led us to show that we don't need the secondary site. And so that site is not planned to be part of this system.
Are you saying the cemetery property?
The cemetery property is not planned to be part of this system.
But it wasn't big enough to handle the system?
No, it was not big enough on its own to handle the capacity that's being designed for.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Other questions on Zoom? Please raise your hand either physically. Yes, Peter. Just make sure you come off mute so we can hear you.
Got me?
Yep, we got you.
All right, thank you. First, before I get started, I would like to dispel what Tosca said about that Archiby's farm being populated with 400 apartment buildings or whatever. That was never on the map. It was never the plan. She may be referring mistakenly to the Northwest Regional mapping showing potential development areas. That side of 118 heading toward the village from the center, this is wetland. It's off the table. The right side, on the other hand, given Act 250 lower requirements, would be developable. So, I don't think that there's a fear of 400 apartment buildings going in there, but they're proposing that it is developable, and if we reduce the footprint required, there could be high density development there. As far as the information, I think that kind of what I'm taking away from everybody is that nobody's against the wastewater system. What we're looking for was, how does more recent legislation play into this? It should, in my opinion, have been put front and center along with all your other information, which, you know, was quite heavily disseminated. I get that. You put it everywhere for anyone who had a computer to see, which is most people, if not all. Having put this in front of everybody and saying this does not affect our planning would have been very helpful. But instead, there was no mention that I could see, other than on the regional sites and the state site. There was no mention of how these acts 47, 181, 250, lower restriction affected the plan, our plan for a wastewater system and what it potentially brings in. Speaking with our own Northwest Regional Planning rep, Emily, she said that as things are now on the table, the wastewater system would allow us the opportunity to, the developers the opportunity to build higher density and higher elevation structures within the village center. And that, I believe she's referring to Walton Abe's project. Continuing that thought, Walton Abe's project of, according to Walter, 3 apartment buildings housing 10 units each, 3 stories. If what Emily says is true, it could be 4 stories, and it basically would consume whatever surplus you've got planned on the system. If Suzanne's numbers are correct, she just went through a rough estimate of how many units would be required to consume that surplus, and their project consumes almost all of it according to her math. So it kind of begs the question, are you or have you been given any obligations in exchange for this money? Does the state put any parameters on it for you?
So I guess I don't understand, like, parameters in regards to what? Because the monies do have parameters around them. It's any money, so there's definitely parameters. If you're asking about whether any of the money is directly related to a specific use, then you got to be more specific about parameters that you're looking at. And I will just, I said it before and I'll say it again. We went back through with our zoning administrator and with the head of regional planning back in August of last year when Act 181 was passed, which put into effect some of the Home Act things they adopted. We went back through with both our zoning administrator and the head of regional planning to ask the question that's being asked: what does this mean in terms of what could happen in Montgomery with a wastewater system as it relates to current zoning bylaws? We've talked about this, we've discussed it. I am happy to put the text of these emails into the minutes if people want to just read them themselves. I mean, it's kind of being suggested that we've tried to hide this information. It's been discussed here many times.
By not putting it forward, you kind of did.
I beg your pardon, Peter?
I said by not putting it forward, you kind of did hide it.
Peter, I've read verbatim what's come out of here multiple times. I've emailed it to you multiple times. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we don't attach to the minutes. I mean, if people want information, they can come ask it and we'll give it to them. If people specifically, affirmatively say, I want something attached to the minutes, we will attach it. But the idea that we're trying to hide some part of information just because it wasn't put on bright pink paper and attached to the minutes is, frankly, a little bit disturbing.
To both of us. to both of us, because you're supposed to be representing us. And as far as I can see, you're representing the state more than you are the town.
How so, Peter?
Well, because you're not clearly indicating what the state programs require of towns with wastewater systems relative to creating affordable housing, for example. Have you?
So, in what capacity?
Instead, you come storming into an outreach meeting like a 5-year-old, yelling and screaming, what about this, what about that? Red in the face, you're not getting an answer, you walk out. I mean, is that representing the town?
What information would you like, Peter, that we can provide for you in a format that works for you?
How about the whole picture? It would work for everybody.
Peter, you got to be more specific. The whole picture is a very broad statement.
Charlie, you're supposed to be running this town. You don't know what the whole picture is?
Okay.
Peter, if you have a specific question about specific information we can chase down for you, please let us know or email me a list of all the things you'd like and we will chase it down.
And you'll circle back?
Yeah. If you have specific information that you'd like us to track down for you, we are happy to.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times, Charlie, without response forthcoming, that it's just on deaf ears now.
What specific piece of information?
I mean, that's like your way of saying, we're done.
Again, what specific piece of information would you like, Peter? We're happy to chase it down for you.
I'll put it in a memo to you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
All right, and I'd also like to put in a memo correcting your town meeting minutes, select board meeting minutes of the 23rd. It was a nice one-sided story, but it didn't reflect the entire meeting. People have to go to the Zoom to see that, and I'll point that out for you as well.
Yeah, all of our meetings are recorded and people can review the meetings on the Northwest Access TV YouTube page.
So what's the point of written minutes then?
Because we're legally required to keep them.
You should keep them complete then, the full picture.
I appreciate your opinion if they're not. Again, if folks want to review the recordings, you're welcome to. Marika, I saw your hand up. Do you want to go? Marika, did you have your hand up?
I'm kind of disturbed by the fact that people are so concerned about development. What are they concerned about? Like Walmart, Amazon coming in, enormous condominiums and gated communities. I've been here a long time, and when I came here, the population was 600 people. It's now 1,200. It's about 11 people per year since I've been here. First of all, crime did not increase exponentially. And the town is just a nice town. And I don't think this wastewater system is really going to change. It's going to take a long time before it's in. And things go very slowly, as Tosca has mentioned, and she's right. So, and already talking about extensions, that's kind of ridiculous. We don't even have a wastewater system. How about, why talking about extending? I mean, this is a moot point. And that's mine.
Thanks, Marika. Others on the Zoom? Last call for anybody on the Zoom. Okay, anybody in the room that hasn't spoken yet? Yeah, Anthony.
So once the system is at capacity, so say you add another 50 units to the system and we're at maximum capacity, and can the state at that point come in and say they'd like to make it bigger, or would that be up to us?
Under current state law, I do not believe the state could come in and force us to build a bigger system.
Right.
I mean, again, hypothetically, in a certain amount of time, I don't know what could happen, but right now, the state cannot come in and force you to build a wastewater system or expand one.
That would go up for a town discussion and town vote if it were proposed to make it larger?
Yeah, I mean, the things that would drive that would probably be most directly related to the funding of the project and stuff like that. But no, the state can't come in and say to a municipality, you must build this system or you must expand this system. Yeah. Anybody, Roberta?
So, I think what a lot of people are concerned about, at this point, all the houses and businesses on Main Street will be connected at a certain price. At this time, it's whatever's existing. I think people are concerned about what's not existing, and once that is put on, at what point are they part of the system? So if somebody built, which the biggest thing is a Coda property, previous long Coda property, if they build a unit there, does it have to be built before it's hooked into the system? And if not, then they would have to pay.
To pay to connect, yes.
Pay to connect.
Yes.
And then they would be limited to the number of gallons per water that we limit them to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because do we all want to put all our water, or our wastewater coming from that one property, or do we want to spread it out for other businesses or people that might move in somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can I clarify? Because I think what I hear you asking is if they build one thing, or maybe I'm thinking beyond what you were saying. If they build one thing, they pay to connect, it is X number of units, and that is within our capacity. Are you also asking if they could then just like expand on that?
No, I'm just saying at this point, they would have to pay to hook onto the system because they're not existing at this point. But they would be limited to what is granted by whomever about what the capacity is, because do we want to put all our 10,000 extra gallons into that piece of property, or do we want to have it so that they maybe get 7,000 and 3,000 is for other stuff, so that would
I
limit
understand your question.
what they would build there. Because they can't build bigger than what our capacity can
Allow
work
for
with.
it. Yep.
Mm.
Okay, so it is already 8:12. I do kind of want to, we do have other stuff on the agenda to work through. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet that wants to go?
I just have a 1-second question for Mark. How much more capacity do we have in the water?
The water system's designed up to this, we can do up to 75,000 a day.
Okay.
So we've got a lot more capacity on the water
Just-
system.
Yep, thanks.
Okay. Anybody
That's
who
for the
hasn't?
village and the center?
Yes. Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, can we do one last question?
My question is there any way for the town to limit, like, any additional building? So, say this particular project, if there's that many units, they have to provide their own leach field and own septic system, so that it would allow the rest of any smaller developments to expand in Montgomery. Like, I understand we're trying to get more housing, but if we build the system, then there's such a small window at the end of capacity. Could we somehow look at somebody not building so big that it eats the entire capacity, like she was saying? Or like, literally, at a certain level, you have to do your own.
Yeah.
Do we have anything in the books, or is anything like
Yeah, so we
that?
definitely don't have anything in the books yet. And through the development of the ordinance, we can look at the options that we've got. I think I understand what you're saying. If you get somebody who says, I want to connect, but we say your property is all sand and gravel for 300 feet, you can put in a conventional system as opposed to over here. I mean, I mean, so we could look
We're
at.
just keeping our options open.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah, and as we develop the ordinance, we can certainly look at how to manage that as far as connections go. Yeah, Chris, and then.
I want to clear something up. I want you to clear something up for me. So, if the charter amendment, if you suspend the charter, if that passes at town meeting, and then our charter amendment, the petition charter amendment, so basically you'll be suspending whatever we put in the charter, is what you're saying. Can you clear that up, please?
No
You're
more time.
suspending for 3 years the charter if it passes on town meeting, so there's no charter.
So if,
Just on-
if the articles at town meeting, because there are multiple articles, but if what passes at town meeting related to the local option tax passes and the charter is suspended for 3 years, there'll be a local option tax in place through the non-charter means, and the charter gets suspended for 3 years.
So the second amendment would be null and void even if it was approved, is basically what we got going on here. Because that's a charter amendment to allow people the option to opt out of connecting to any wastewater system.
Yeah, I guess you're right, that it would, if it's suspended.
April
if
Fool's
it's-
Day, that's awesome.
If it's suspended
Good troll.
the entire.
Good troll.
If the.
Thank you.
But it would only be suspended for 3 years, and the town would have to come back and address that, so it wouldn't be, it'd be something the town would have to address anyway, if that makes sense. So like, yeah,
Doesn't make sense.
it's suspended for 3 years, but then the town would have to come back and affirmatively fix the charter.
It's hilarious. Good one. Thank you.
Okay.
So basically, everybody on town meeting day has to
Go
vote
down
no
and vote that, damn.
for your 1% for that in order for our April 1st to go forward. That's what you're saying, basically. If you get that voted in on town meeting day, what we had the people ask for, what you're supposed to represent is us people, it's all null and void on April 1st. That's what you're saying. So people are screwed. Everybody that has got onto this petition has said something, and you don't listen because you went around the back door and said, I got a way to get them now. Don't tell me you didn't, because you had a meeting, a special meeting on the 31st of December that you guys could have talked about it, but no, every excuse there was. Yes, Charlie, I'm upset because I've been watching you. I've been doing the way you know what, it's not even worth talking to you anymore because you're gonna do what you want. These people actually voted against you for bribing everybody to sign on.
Bribing is.
It was a bribe. These guys, kudos to them because I gave you thumbs up.
It's not a bribe.
Yes, it is.
It's
You're
something
telling
that
people to
is-
sign on to the wastewater and we'll give you $500 tax-free. So how is that not a bribe?
It's not
Don't tell
tax-free.
me it's not.
It's
Everybody
standard
else here
practice
agree.
in
Yeah,
that.
it's a bull. It's against the law.
It's not against the law. It's, okay, whatever.
Let's move
Nothing,
We didn't
nothing
do
that
that.
we say is gonna fix the fact that we're all corrupt individuals out for our own self. I'm pretty sure
I'm
that's kind
not
of what's
saying you
going on.
all.
That is
Yeah, you
trolling.
pretty
No,
already
I
are.
didn't. I said you went around the back door to make people say, oh, on town meeting day, if you raise your hand, we will just pay for tax on beverages and motels. Knowing that we wanted to get rid of the whole damn thing on April Fool's Day.
That's the funniest part.
You set that up, no matter how much you say right now, that you say you're corrupt, go ahead.
You're not gonna believe us, no matter what we say, so, yeah, and anything that we do to keep
It's
something that
right there
doesn't
in
meet your
facts.
ends.
I know the day I put the petition in, and I know you guys had a secret meeting.
It wasn't secret. It wasn't, it was not a
And you can't,
secret
then you
meeting.
told me that the lawyer, couldn't get a hold of the lawyer because it was Christmas time. Bull, we pay for that lawyer, so they are supposed to answer you
You're
no
right,
matter what
you're
day.
right. I should
And
have gone to their
technically,
house on Christmas
working
and dragged
days-
their ass out. All right,
Working
we're
days,
gonna
there's
move
only
on.
Christmas and New Year's the town got off, whether you give them off or not, but those are the two legal holidays. So
Alright.
those are the only two working days that we're accountable.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on. Item B under Public Works is the streetscape project. There's no updates on that tonight. We're still going back and forth with wetland and historic preservation. Mark, any general updates under Public Works?
Just plowing and maintaining equipment and trying to, they want to try to get some brush cut too, this winter. Yeah, Alberta, you just shove your head. We get snow every day and they're keeping the roads plowed. Every time you go to work, your road's plowed, isn't it? When I go around with the bus, the road's plowed. So they are
come up
working.
my house about 5
They are
times a
working.
day.
Yeah,
Even.
so, don't need to shrug your head, sorry. That's it, for the updates.
Okay, thanks. Merle, did you have something for visitors unrelated to the wastewater project?
Not on the wastewater, have something else.
Yep, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I had very interesting conversations today, telephone, almost hilarious. I was curious about those curbs in Enosburg put in last summer. So I thought I would call Enosburg and get some valid reason, some purpose for curbs. So I called the town clerk and she said she didn't know. She had no idea why they were put in. She said, call the town garage. I know they'll know. I called the town garage. This guy I talked to, it took a while to get him to understand what I was talking about. Like he didn't even know they were put in. He says, I don't know. He says, call the village office. So I called the village office and asked the person there. Oh, I have no idea, she says, but let me give you the town manager. That's three. That's okay. Thank you. Got the town manager and told him who it was. And I was just curious about what purpose do they serve? He said, well, it's to prevent water running on the people's lawns. Okay. Water flow uphill in Enosburg? There's about a 2 to 4 foot bank all along there. So water ain't going to flow in the lawns. Well, he says it's part of the project. I said, well, fine. So what purpose do they serve? Well, he says they prevent erosion. I said, really? Has there been erosion in the last 10 years? So does it really serve a purpose? He says, well, he says they replace the ones that used to be there. I said, okay. So then there's serve no actual purpose for the people. Thank you very much. And so that reminded me exactly of Montgomery. You guys are wanting to go ahead with these curbs in Montgomery that serve no actual useful purpose. In fact, they're going to harm the people, and you know they are going to harm the people. And you've had no valid reason. The first reason when it started was to prevent parking. And you didn't say that no more because that, of course, would be unpopular and turn people against it. And then you said safety. Well, you know that's not true. The curbs provide no safety for people or property. And then we got the baby stroller. So we spend tens of thousands of dollars that maybe you could count on one hand and have 3 fingers left how many times somebody with a baby stroller would have to go out on the road. And so I echo Peter's comments. You people, anybody that's elected a public office is a servant of the people. I've been in public office in Montgomery for 44 years, and I've always believed that, and I've tried that. We serve the people. We're supposed to act in the people's best interest. You folks, by going with these curbs, don't care the harm that they're going to do to a lot of people. It's just so sad. I know you have to know there is no useful purpose for those curbs. You've never come up with an answer. And you still, unless you can come up with one tonight, you have no answer for putting in those curbs. Thank you.
Thanks, Merle. I will point out for the record that at town meeting day, the question of curbs came up and the town voted, it was advisory, but the town voted to move ahead with the curbs. And just so when it comes to following the will of the people or representing the outcome or whatever, I don't think that's a...
Because the people voted at town meeting for the curbs? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But that was a non-binding vote. That was made very clear. In fact, Jacob went out of his way and violated the role of the moderator and went on about how those curbs, those articles were non-essential. They really didn't mean anything. And that was a non-binding vote. You know you didn't have to. You even said yourself, the non-binding vote, you didn't have to abide by it. And you sure didn't bother you when the 2 votes on this water system, the people said no, which were binding, but that didn't bother you. You ignored it and went ahead. So that's hogwash. That's just saying something to support your position, Charlie. Come, be honest. Come on.
Yeah, well, I disagree with the way you're presenting that, Merle, but we're going to have to just agree to disagree on that. Anybody have anything else for visitors? All right.
Yeah, just one more. I got a text who was wondering if the town meeting vote is subject to a reconsideration vote.
Yes, if an article, yes, I don't recall off the top of my head the process for that, but I believe there is an opportunity for a petition for reconsideration. And I have to go back and check the process, and that involves town meeting. But I believe that there is a mechanism to trigger a reconsideration vote. I can look into what that looks like. And I only say that because different kinds of votes have different sorts of reconsideration votes, whether they're Australian ballot reconsideration or a certain time frame within which, but I will find that information out for you, Charlie, and get that for you. All right, if there's something else in
Charlie? Is there not the opportunity to pass over your article?
There's an opportunity to pass it over, there's an opportunity to vote it down, there's an opportunity to amend it.
Thank you.
And that goes for any article at town meeting.
Question, can we have the information for that reconsideration and also the link you had said earlier related to seeing all the information that was already shared, something YouTube?
Yeah, so the recordings are all on the Northwest Access TV.
Just can that be shared in the notes when we?
Yeah, we
email and all the information?
Yeah. Why don't we just start putting, we usually put the link to the Zoom
The Zoom
recording
link
on the
is
minutes.
at the top of the.
But
of
it's not, but
each
that's not
set
the
of
Northwest
minutes.
Access recording, it's the recording
No,
off of the
they're-
Zoom. So we can start putting the Northwest Access TV.
your website.
Yeah, it says meeting
Yeah.
recordings. When you go to the website, right on the landing page, there's a button that says meeting recordings. And you can go to any recording on any date from a select board or public.
Which is actually easier than digging into the minutes and like finding
Yeah,
the
I
link
just don't
in the
know,
minutes,
does
but
that bring you to Northwest Access TV's site, or does it bring you to? Oh yeah, it does. Okay, so that link on the website brings you to Northwest Access TV's YouTube channel, where you can watch them all. And then I'm sorry, you said the link to the site, and then there was something else that you were looking for.
You were saying about the reconsideration that there were steps.
Yes. Okay. We'll chase down what that process exactly looks like.
And the minutes are posted 5 days after the meeting.
Within 5 days of the meeting, the minutes get
Of this
posted.
meeting.
Yes. Where are we? Old business, hazard mitigation plan update. So Regional Planning Commission is working on an agreement, having selected them as the contractor for this. Sean is also working up an online community survey for the hazard mitigation plan that will go out as part of this. The next potential meeting of the planning team would be February 17th. So that's a question for the board. February 17th is our next regular meeting. That is President's Day. It's a holiday. Do folks have an opinion one way or the other as to whether they want to meet on President's Day or push the meeting later into the week?
We can just meet that Monday, I think.
Yeah, that should be fine.
You good? Okay. Okay, if there's no objection, we'll just keep it on the 17th. So directly before the select board meeting will be the hazard mitigation plan working group meeting.
Okay. So that'll be at 6.
Either 5:30 or 6. I'll work out with Sean how much time he wants.
Yeah.
That brings us to new business. The first item here has to do with fiscal year 26 employee compensation. So the plan is to do this in executive session. Per 1 VSA 313A1A, this involves negotiation of contracts with employees, and so that is something that the board can do in a closed session, so it does not put the individual or the board at a disadvantage based on what's discussed. We've done this every time we talk about compensation, so it shouldn't be a surprise for anybody. So if we want to go into executive session to discuss that, then the motion would be to enter into executive session per 1 VSA 313A1A to discuss employee compensation and contracts.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries, and the board is entering executive session at 8:30 p.m. So at this point,
Good night, everybody.
we're gonna
Good
pause. the
night.
Night,
recording.
Larry.
Okay, so we're back recording. So the motion would be to come out of executive session.
I'll make a motion to come out of executive session.
Thanks, Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second from Leanne. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of exiting executive session at 8:43 p.m., please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the board is now out of executive session at 8:43 p.m. Liquor license, tobacco licenses, we do not have any. Fleet permits, we do not have any. And that brings us through our agenda. So a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Leanne. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of adjourning at 8:43 p.m., please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries and the board is adjourned.